Hi, and welcome to Rec Chat, where students and professionals talk about all things in collegiate recreation. I'm your host, Rochelle Williams from Western Washington University, where I'm the Aquatics and Youth Programs Coordinator. Thanks for joining us, and if you haven't checked out the other episodes, we've got 4 other episodes in this series, so please make sure to peep all of them. We were super excited to highlight a member of the Asian Caucus today. But before we introduce our panelists, we'd like to share our gratitude with our friends at NERSA HQ for all of their support. If you haven't already, please give them a follow on Twitter or Instagram at NERSA Live. Also, did you know that RecChat is on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube? We're on all the things, so make sure to check us out at RecChat. So without further ado, I will let our panelists start by introducing themselves. So could you share with us who you are and a brief journey of your or a brief summary of your journey into higher education?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Rochelle. My name is Mike Wong, and I serve as the Director of Campus Recreation at San Francisco State University. And I've been in higher education for a little over a decade now. I originally started as a graduate teaching associate in the Department of Kinesiology when I was a grad student. And eventually, with some convincing from a close mentor of mine at that time, I transitioned to a graduate assistant role at California State University's Student Recreation Center. Now, at that time, the Student Recreation Center was brand new, so it was sort of the shiny building that we had on campus. And it definitely intrigued my interest, but I wasn't sure what campus rec was. I just knew that I have a passion for learning, and I found that higher education was a place where I could continue to learn and always be able to be actively involved with other people's learning. So that was special for me. And I think that's what makes rec so special, is that I can continue doing that, follow my passion of learning and helping other people learn and grow as well. But after I graduated at Cal State Northridge, I worked in several different roles and across different campuses, mostly within the Cal State system here on the West Coast. And I can just continue doing what I love. And one last thing to add is currently I am a third-year doctoral student in higher education at Azusa Pacific University. It's a low residency program, so I do some traveling and I do a lot of the coursework after work in my own hours. But yeah, that's pretty much myself.
Great, thanks so much, and congrats on being in that doctoral program. And also, I think Azusa Pacific has a beautiful pool. I think side fact, but congrats, that's really great. So could you talk to us a little bit about how NERSA has supported your professional development in general, and then also with celebrating your Asian identity?
Yeah, rec was an industry that I knew very little about when I started. A lot of that learning that I experienced was experiential. I learned through observation and doing things myself, sort of the Bandura's social cognitive theory model, where you see it and then you kind of internalize it and then you go out and do it. NERSA provided me the context for the work. I was able to understand the history of campus rec. I was able to understand how it's relevant to supporting student success and all the great things that we do and how it relates to other areas of someone's wellness. One of the resources I could say that I really enjoy is the Recreation Sports Journal that NERSA publishes. I think it's quarterly that they publish it, but I really just dive into that research. It's neat to see how different programs will address challenges that are local to them, but also probably very relatable to among many other rec professionals across the land. And as you can tell, I'm a huge nerd for research, so I love getting into that. NERSA also has this massive community of professionals who are really engaged in helping others grow, and as a result, elevating the profession and the industry. So I've browsed through some of their reports on their website and met a lot of wonderful people across the NERSA land that have kind of written the reports and done work into those reports. And I also looked at some of the data sets that they've had. So it's always interesting to me to kind of see the resources they have. I feel like there's a report for every area of rec that I can think of, and then probably areas that I haven't thought of. And then as far as celebrating my Asian identity, I've always felt that NERSA was a professional organization that welcomed everyone. I've been a part of other professional organizations, but the relationships that I've had with those organizations amongst their members, it wasn't the same. I think the NERSA folks are different. They share a much closer connection. There's no pretentiousness in the folks that I've met through NERSA, and the people, the programs that we've had, the ideas, all of that, it's been welcomed. I love that. That's great to see. I've also never experienced a professional organization that's has its own affinity group, the NERSA Asian Caucus. I love that. It's a space for other Asian rec professionals to connect and to share about our unique experiences. I think that's really neat. I'm not always the most vocal person when it comes to these meetings and Asian Caucus meetings, but I think when I do have something to say, I don't feel like I have to hold it back. It's a space where I can speak up if I wanted to.
No, that's great to hear. And I also agree with you that the all of the data sets and all of the research is super interesting and really helpful in being able to not justify what we're doing on campuses, but also if you're, have those broader discussions across your campuses when you're asking for more resources or higher pay or whatever it may be, is very, very helpful to have all of that research. So I completely agree with you. Could you talk to us a bit about how your identity has impacted your experience and well-being formerly as a student? And this can be any time from a child, student, all the way through your doctoral student now, so you're still a student, into you currently as a professional within campus recreation.
So as an undergraduate student, I think this is really challenging for me to answer because I wasn't sure what my identity was, or I guess in some cases I was still in the process of forming and creating that identity for myself. And then even knowing what I did at that time or what little I did know at that time, there wasn't much meaning behind it. So I didn't fully understand the context of who I am and what I stood for. I was really fortunate to attend Cal State Northridge, which is tremendously diverse even for a West Coast institution, and had a significant Asian American population there. They have they still have it, but they have a Asian American Studies program that was really welcoming, and I didn't plan to, but I took one class and I just kept taking more classes, and eventually I was able to get a minor in Asian American Studies. But again, really welcoming folks there. And then as a professional in campus recreation, I've embraced a very open and positive perspective of being open to learning and passionate for growing. I think those are really important things to me. Like I mentioned earlier, in my identity as an Asian American, I don't often meet other professionals in the field who are Asian or even in higher education leadership. And that's kind of surprising to me, given how many Asians attend and pursue higher education, especially now with such a growing diversity in students in college students. That's very surprising for me. That gap between the professionals that serve institutions that are Asian compared to the very diverse student sets that we have now, that disconnect is really important for us to address. And I think that's part of my work that I do now. I think that it is unfortunate, though, when we see that gap and we see that disconnect, because we lose a sense of our relatability with our students when we don't have folks who look like us and share the lived experiences that are very unique and personal. We might laugh or joke about stories of our Asian parents or some of just the weird things that just make sense that only another Asian person can understand. I think those are the most important things when it comes to the identity. So in terms of like well-being, I think having that sense of relatability is sort of like a racial well-being. It's not on the wellness wheel yet, but perhaps someday it would be.
No, thank you so much for sharing. And I think just from what I heard in some of the other spotlights that we've done is that it seems like there's a shift in perspective among maybe Asian communities or Asian parents about jobs that their kids can have or that they would like for them to have. And that moving away from the traditional like doctor, lawyer, that type of track for your life, it seems like more young Asian Americans within our field have been able to kind of have the flexibility to think outside the like traditional ideas that their parents may have of what they can do and be successful. Yeah, which like that's, I mean, my parents had the same. When I was like, oh, I'm going into campus recreation, they're like, what? What is that? So yeah, I can imagine that it would be, you know, even more difficult from people who maybe have recently immigrated here or just like don't understand what recreation is.
Yeah, well, I would add that you know, at first it was kind of hard to wrestle with that disconnect that I have with parents and like not understanding what campus recreation is. But then I don't blame them because the values, the expectations, the conventions that they held are rooted in a dominant culture that might have supported that we had nothing to do with, but we're just simply following along. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as they feel those feelings. It's like, I get that. And I didn't before, but as I learn more and as I reflect more, it's like, I get that there's probably going to be some disappointment. And there's going to be certainly a lot of misunderstanding with that. But I don't want to, you know, be too critical of that because they've extended so much grace to me in the past. The least I can do is be a little bit more patient with them.
No, absolutely. I totally feel that. So, are there any mentors that you would like to recognize that have supported you in your personal and professional journey?
Yes, absolutely, Rochelle. How much time do you have? I will start with Sandra Salute was my first supervisor at Cal State Northridge. She is one of the most trusting, patient, supportive people I've ever worked with. She still stays in contact with me today, and is one of my biggest cheerleaders and advocates for what I do. I don't know where the heck I'd be without her. I'm really grateful. Just when I first started in rec, I don't know what the heck I didn't know what the heck I was doing. At times, Rochelle, I still feel that way, but I think having that person that just steadies your nerves and you know, I've had some issues with anxiety before, but they've kind of really reassured me that hey, you're doing it great. And I think that's all it took was someone that would take the time to listen to you and was open to learning from me, from a person that didn't know what I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. But for a person that just to be open with it, I think that's really special. That's a lot of gratitude for Sandra. She's really special. One of another persons that I just have to include on this list is Dr. Lynn Nestor. Lynn is a former direct supervisor of mine when I worked at San Bernardino. Another person who has just tremendously supported me, placed me in roles that challenged me. And at the time, I was like, wait, you want to put me in this working group or you want me to be part of this committee? Like, I don't know why I would, but you know, for her to see me beyond the role I was currently in and see me do other things, like that was the part that I didn't get. And now, you know, in hindsight, looking at it, I have the benefit of saying, oh, like she was setting me up to succeed down the line long term. I think that's really special. And again, another person who just had a high level of trust in me and really supported me so much. I think yeah, that's special. The NERSA is a place that just you kind of find folks that do that, and it's not hard to run to someone who's done that for somebody else. My former supervisor, Vlad Del Rossi, so we started off as close colleagues who worked kind of in adjacent positions. And I credit him with being a person who changed the way I saw leadership. And I think I had some conventional styles of leadership models that I followed that perhaps you need to be firm or intimidating. And then he kind of just shatters all that because he's a person who genuinely cares for your wellness, for you as an individual. And I think that's really special because that's the profession that we're in. We're in recreation, but there's a tremendous component of wellness that we have. Vlad will check on you. And then sometimes he gets to the business more than you would want, but I think that's just who he is. And he deeply cares about you and your safety and your wellness. He never just overworks you. He keeps that in mind. You know, he can see and can sense when I'm stressed out and he picks you up. I think that's special for a leader to have. He's sort of in his own leadership program that he's on his professional journey as well. So I think there's the leadership that he's developed. I think some of it was intuitive, but also something that he developed intellectually along the way in his journey as well. So I think that's something that he continues to grow in and excel in. And then she's not here with us in the interview, but Pam Sue, who shares so much knowledge and experience in rec and has been really open to sharing that with me and sharing that with many others and helping us grow and learn and continue supporting us. As much as she knows and has been through in collegiate rec, she is still open to learning from my perspective. So yeah, no, that's something that's this sense of humility that I have is it's sort of like this intellectual humility that she models for me. And as a leader myself now, seeing that in others, I want to make sure I honor other people's voices as well. So I think that's something that's I think I've really taken from Pam. And the good part of it is I still get to work very closely with Pam because she's not in the department, but she's still within the same division. So I'm truly blessed to have her. I could probably list a ton more, but I'll stop it there. I can say that I'm so grateful for a lot of the folks. And then the crazy part about this is that there's going to be more folks that I'll meet and you'll meet and other professions meet in this profession because that's the nature of nurse. So you're going to meet some really wonderful folks that will help you along the way in your journey.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's always wild the people you meet who see something in you that you don't see in yourself that are like, hey, we're just gonna like push you further than you want to go. And we know that there's a reason, but you don't know that there's a reason. And it's always wonderful when you have those people who see where you're going to go instead of where you currently are, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, so thanks so much for sharing those. Would you be able to talk to us about how some of your lived experiences regarding Asian stereotypes or biases that you've maybe experienced personally or professionally?
Yeah, I don't think I always have this on my mind, so I'm sure there's many more that just kind of flown right by that I haven't noticed. But at times it feels like I have to adapt my identity to the dominant identity of the space that I occupy. So, and before I say that, it should never be the case because that's massively taxing on an individual who might be the minority in that space, but also fundamentally wrong. That's not what we want to be doing. I don't want to be too specific with this example, but I will say that earlier in my career, I found myself agreeing a lot more and just complying with what others said and just the normal practices and structures that we had in place. And that was just me as a way of what I felt like I was just surviving. I was just passing by, and it was me trying to one look competent, but also feel like I was fitting in with the group. I think that again, that's a very flawed way of approaching matters. I think it made sense in some cases, but looking back at that, like that probably wasn't the route I would take if I could do it again. I was more concerned. I think it came from this concern of getting others' seal of approval and just fitting in. And I think we all have a sense of that, is wanting to be heard, wanting to feel valued. I think that's where it drives from. But the approach we take can certainly be different. And the more I was thinking about this, if I were to take a critical approach to this and how our work elevates our students, we're doing a disservice to our students if we just stay with the status quo as is. So I remember reflecting on this in a past journal entry I was writing, and I phrased it as I was trading a part of my Asian identity for whiteness, just so I could feel like I was fitting into the dominant culture of that space. I was using phrases and words that I wouldn't, like I don't usually talk like this. What am I saying? Or in my email communications, maybe I'll like erase something and rewrite it over again, just to make it sound like that's what someone else would say, or someone who's competent in this role would say. And again, that's not the approach I would have taken looking back at it. Um, I didn't know it at the time, and now I sort of have the benefit of the hindsight. But I thought I wasn't seeing that back then. And then if I realized that, okay, if that's what I wasn't realizing back then, like, well, what else is there? What else is out there that I'm not realizing? Because I'm sure there's much more that I could be thinking of. But I think I'll just stick with that example as is.
No, thank you so much for sharing. And again, this I think was kind of a little bit of a theme throughout some of the other member spotlights is thinking about like what is deemed to be professional or what is deemed to be competent, and like it's usually like white males. And so thinking about like the white supremacist culture that like higher education has been founded, and the the roles and expectations of like employees and competency and communication styles and all of these other things are for everybody to move in one direction and look and behave in one way, but that's not the right way. That's not the only right way. And you should be able to communicate and speak and wear your hair however you like and wear whatever clothing you like within your workplace that is workplace appropriate, but kind of trying to move away from like professionalism, because professionalism isn't useful for anybody when it really is just an erasure of everybody's identities. So I think that's really important to kind of like you were talking through it, like naming that, to just be like, even if you speak a different way from somebody or you write in a different way, like that's not a reflection of how competent you are on your in your job. Like that's just who you are as a person and how you choose to communicate.
Yeah,
So,
it doesn't allow the individual to lend agency to their own voice. So when we talk about professionalism, perhaps then that's a construct of white supremacy then. That's much deeper than that. And granted, there's a lot of gray areas to this that I haven't fully explored yet. But certainly when we say professionalism, that's a very loaded word that we use now.
yeah. Yeah, and that's, I think I've shifted away from using professionalism and like maybe using like professional communication, and maybe I've started using like work appropriate communication. Like, don't text me, sup. Just like things like that, right? But yeah, it's interesting to think about, like, and that also like helps challenge what your views of professionalism are, if you're able to be like, this is why do I think these certain things are professional and then these other things are not, and then if these are the, like, is this useful? And most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
It's not useful at all. Like, I have blue hair right now and tattoos, and that doesn't make me any less competent at my job. That's just what I look like. So, yeah. So, as you talked about, kind of trying to move within your workplace to kind of fit the what social norms or the expected behaviors. Did you have any situations where you had to personally navigate microaggressions, or has there been anything in the past that has happened that you've had to kind of like handle those situations?
In the workplace, I would say it's been really cordial and collegial. Working in higher ed, I think, kind of lends itself to that. It's granted, I'm not saying higher ed's perfect, but I think there's a lot of things that can give credit to higher ed for, and I think it's getting a lot of the pieces right when it comes to making sure the spaces we create are welcoming, uh, give agency to people's voices that might not have had agency in the past. But when it comes to, I think, just everyday encounters, I visited a campus bookstore, and bookstore is one example, but this happens to in-person shopping in different places that I've went to. Prior to the pandemic, we used to shop in person. Um, I felt like I commanded so much more attention than another person would. So if I entered the store, I'd usually get greeted, which is great. But if I turned the corner to a different aisle, there would be someone right there ready to check on me and say, "Hey, did you need any help?" It's like, "Did you find everything you need today?" "Yeah, great, thank you." Again, and it might seem harmless on that surface, but personally, that's a terrible feeling to have, like, that I'm gonna do something wrong, or I might do something wrong. It feels taxing to have that, and I'll feel self-conscious about it. So I'll have sort of rules for myself. It's like, all right, well, I'm never gonna touch any merchandise unless I know I'm gonna purchase it. It's just rules that I follow in place now, because like I don't want to have any sort of confrontation, even if I didn't do anything. I just don't want to go through that. Nowadays, you can buy almost anything online. Perhaps supporting online shopping can be seen as a form of equity work.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's not something that I've ever had to experience, and it is definitely the like, my husband is Black, and the first time we went out and about shopping, I just like had things in my hand and I was wandering aimlessly, and he was like, "Are you gonna buy that?" I was like, "Nope." And he was like, "Okay." And I was like, I may not." And he had shared with me that, like, kind of what you said, he has rules for shopping, and he always gets a bag, and he always asks for a receipt, and he always makes sure it's open. And it is just awful.
Mm.
And I am really sorry that that's something that you have to go through, because that's not appropriate.
Yeah, thank you for understanding, Michelle.
Yeah, no, that's, and hopefully by, folks hearing this, that if they're it's also really helpful that, like, if you're with friends who are BIPOC or are in situations, that you're aware of things that may happen, so that way you're able to not put them in uncomfortable situations. Or um yeah, like, I now always ask for things in bags when I'm shopping with my husband, because I know it'll make him more comfortable. So, like, things like that, that hopefully this will help folks kind of navigate that situation and just be more aware of kind of what's going on. So you're currently a director, which is super exciting, and you've worked at a few different institutions, and so you've been able to see kind of a lot of systems that you've had to work within. So have you been able to incorporate any kind of like DEI work or DEI lens through kind of like the systems of inequities that are either within kind of campus recreation, or maybe within like your own programs that you worked within, or the higher ed kind of system in general?
Yeah, I can say I tried to. I tried to. And I look at it this way. When it comes to DEI work and sort of dismantling the systems of inequities, we need to think from both sides of it. We need to think on the individual side, and we also need to think on the systemic side. So from the individual side, that could just be having one-on-one conversations with students, or we can just do uh, maybe small group trainings of understanding some different experiences and what those might mean, the context behind that, and even the sub-language below that context. So that's sort of like understanding the individual things, and that's important. That's necessary. But then there's also the much bigger, massive structures. Structures are created in place to replicate what they're meant to do, and what we're seeing at the outputs that we have, the rates of graduation, the equity gaps that we see. Uh, that's a function. That's a residue of the current systems that we have in place. Now, do I know how to fix? No, no. I need a lot of education. I'm still on a learning journey that's never going to end. To understand where I fit in really and what my role could be and what my role needs to be in terms of dismantling it. But it also comes down to, like, we had talked about this earlier about professionalism. It just, let's do away with that term, or let's uh, use that term, but then with a definition of what we see that term to be. And that's one part of it, is that systemically there's much more. I think as a director, something that I've learned to do is extend grace upon grace. And I've gotten that a lot when I was a student going through my struggles, and some racially related struggles and some not racially related. But regardless, I don't know everyone's story, and not everyone's going to be open to sharing that with me. So I don't have to ask for it. Let's talk about it. Let's negotiate a new deadline, or let's find a new way to complete this one assignment we had you work on. And I think that's part of it, is that why did I put so much urgency on that? Is that yet another construct and tool of white supremacy that we could be dismantling? So there's a lot of internal thoughts that I'll have. One of the things that I've remained really cognizant and almost even self-conscious about is to not let the power within my role affect how I do things and think about things. Granted, there's responsibilities in my role, yes, but I never want to attain power, or I want to make sure that I'm still using that responsibly, but I never want the power to attain me. I think that's the key. And research, I've done a lot of reading on this, but the research will show as people move up in leadership positions, that's what tends to happen. They might start out on the onset and say, hey, I want to be in a significant leadership role where I can change a lot of these things. Often what happens is the roles change them. And I've been really key and conscious about that as I've continued my professional journey.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of those nuggets of wisdom. And I think that's the way that you just phrased your kind of leadership journey, or as you are right now, is a really great way to reframe our mindset in like the responsibilities of leadership, instead of like the power that could come with being a leader. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, Michael, and thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. We appreciate everybody that's taken the time to watch this episode. And then also, just as a reminder, there are 4 other episodes that are out there. So please make sure to check out all of the Asian member spotlights, Asian Caucus member spotlights. There we go. And yeah, I hope that everyone has a great rest of their week. And thanks so much.